My name's Bob Waldman and I sell vintage cars here in Portland, Oregon. I thought it'd be fun to make a video showing some of the great cars I've sold over the past 20 years and try to narrow down that list to just 10, the top 10 best cars I've ever sold. And you know what? It wasn't easy. I'm just a one-man operation doing about 3 dozen cars a year, but multiply that by 20 years and there's a lot to choose from. But one car that I had to put on the list is this 1960 Chrysler 300F. If you wanted to go big and bold in 1960 and had the cash to do it, you couldn't really get any bolder than this Chrysler letter car. Part of this car's appeal back then was that everyone knew it was fast. A 300F won the Daytona Flying Mile in 1960. Chrysler entered 6 of them, and they placed 1st through 6th. The reason was because of the incredible motor underneath the hood, the mighty Cross-Ram 413, one of the best-looking engine bays ever assembled in a production car. These cars are rare. They only made 248 convertibles, and there's only 78 of them accounted for today. This particular car was rotisserie restored and pretty much perfect in all respects. It was also a factory Toreador red car and only had 76 miles on it since the restoration. I put 2 miles on it and enjoyed every minute of it. Now here's a car that really opened my eyes when I bought it. I had never owned a Citroen before, and this car made me a believer. This is a 1956 traction Avant, and this car was really ahead of its time. It had unibody construction, front-wheel drive, CV jointed drive shafts, and a torsion bar suspension. Pretty advanced for 1956, but the thing to keep in mind is that this car debuted in this same configuration in 1934 and pretty much stayed the same throughout its 21-year model run. A very advanced car. If you've never owned a Citroen, they're worth checking out for the technology, the great styling, the great ride they offer, and the general level of weirdness that they have. I've owned models up through the 1980s. They're great cars. This next car may just look like a nice old Ford Wagon. It's a base model mainline with a 3 on the tree. But what was truly incredible about this car was the fact that it had 2,680 original miles. This car is unrestored. Everything that you see here is original and untouched. That weather stripping, that trim, the wiring, everything. You'd look up underneath the dash and get the feeling that the last person to view that was the guy who assembled it at the factory. It still had its original spark plug wires and even had its original fan belt with the Fomoco logo still on it. Of course, there's a story behind this car, and it involves a farmer in Oklahoma who struck oil on his property, and instead of moving to California, he stuck around and became a philanthropist. Fred Pfeffer was his name, and Mr. Pfeffer was friends with the local Ford dealer, and every year he'd help him out by buying 3 or 4 new cars when they came out. Of course, he ended up with more cars than he could drive, but having a farmer's values, he maintained all of them perfectly. This car was never exposed to the elements, mice never got to it, it was a total time capsule. He passed in the 1980s and his collection was dispersed. You can imagine what a great estate sale that would have been. Since that time, this car had been owned by collectors who knew how to properly maintain original cars like this, and the person I sold it to is continuing that tradition. Another fantastic low-mile original car that I've had is this 1965 Sunbeam Tiger. Sunbeam was a British car manufacturer, best known for the Alpine, the car that Maxwell Smart drove around in the TV series. That car had been in production for about 5 years when Carroll Shelby came calling and worked with Sunbeam to help wedge a Ford V8 into that engine bay. The result was the Tiger, and about 7,000 of these were made between 1964 and 1967. These cars are often cloned from Alpines, but this car was the real deal with just a little under 27,000 documented miles on it. This car had also been featured in magazine articles. I'm thinking I should probably do a separate video on this car because there's a lot of neat little details about it. That original yellow striped vacuum hose and the hose above it with the herringbone pattern, both not available as reproductions. The original Roots Group washer bottle, geeky stuff like that. But if you'd like to see in-depth profiles on any of these cars in this video, leave a note in the comment section and I'll put it on my YouTube to-do list. Another car that was heavy on cool details is this 1942 Chrysler Windsor Club Coupe. These are really rare. Any 1942 model of any car is. This was a limited production year before the automakers started tooling up for war production. So this styling is specific to 1942 only, and one of those cars that I just had to have because it was so unique. This car's design is based in part on Alex Tremulous's famous 1941 Thunderbolt concept car, namely the turned-down front bumper ends and the prominent use of horizontal trim. Inside, this car was optioned with the Highlander interior. This was a $20 option back then and gave you an upholstery pattern that looked like something you'd find at the country club. The Highlander option was available in Mopars throughout the 40s and is always a great look. The dash face and door panel trim was made from marbled Catalin, otherwise known as being made from unobtainium, and if it's not in good shape to begin with, you basically have no easy options for replacing or replicating it. But all of it on this car was in perfect shape, and here in this photo, you can see that there was a parking brake indicator light that made the whole panel glow, as if the material didn't already look awesome. This car sold to a buyer in Belgium, and I can pretty much guarantee he's got the only 42 Chrysler over there. Now this car they made a whole lot more of. It's a 1959 Pontiac Bonneville, two-door hardtop, and they made 27,000 of them. But if you go looking to buy one, they're not easy to find, and definitely hard to find in this condition. This car was bone stock and had dozens of cool styling details everywhere you looked. 1959 was a pinnacle year for GM styling, and the 59 Cadillac seems to get all of the attention, but this Pontiac, in my eyes anyway, is just as high on eyeball. 1959 was the first year for Pontiac's signature split grille and wide track styling, and it really does set them apart from the other GM offerings. Pontiac also had beautiful interiors with tri-tone Morocide upholstery, anodized trim, sparkle thread carpets, star-patterned headliners, and even a grab bar for your passenger to hold onto when you put the hammer down. I think we can all agree that GM styling was at its peak in the 50s, and the argument could be made that 1953 was the year when it really came out in force. 1953 gave us the newly designed Olds 98 Fiesta, the Cadillac Eldorado, and the Buick Skylark, all semi-custom show car convertibles that actually made it into production. And throw in the introduction of a new sports car called the Corvette, and you've got a pretty special year. This is a 1953 Cadillac Series 62 Coupe with 28,000 original miles, looking resplendent in a color that they called Norman Gray, with a court gray roof. This Cadillac now lives in the Netherlands with one very happy Dutchman. This is one of those cars that just looks right from any angle, and there's so many details to look at. The taillights, the Dagmars, the sombreros, the spotlights, the visor. But when you open the door, there's a whole new set of great details to check out. I'll just let the pictures do the talking here. This is one of those cars that I should have found a way to keep, even if it meant that I had to sleep in it. When you can find a Cadillac from this era that looks and drives this good, it really makes their slogan ring true, the standard of the world. From the other side of the world, here's yet another car that I wish I had back. This is a 1967 Mercedes 250 SL. This is the 113 series, otherwise known as the Pagoda. I've sold dozens of these cars. In fact, I actually have a buyer's guide video that's posted on YouTube for those that are in the market for these cars. There's a lot of ways that these cars can deceive a buyer into thinking that they're getting a good car, and if you don't really look closely and know what to look for, you can end up with a bad one. This car had a lot going for it. It was an original DB180 silver gray metallic car and was optioned with leather, black leather, perfectly worn in, with original square weave carpets, great original wood, perfect trunk with the original spare, perfect trunk floor, perfect toolkit. But the really amazing thing about this car is this. This isn't a 4-speed, this is a 5-speed. An ultra-rare ZF transmission, only 882 pagodas were optioned with one. I sold this car to a gentleman in Japan who actually got on a plane and came to Portland to see the car. He didn't speak English and I don't speak Japanese, so we spent most of the day smiling and gesturing at each other. He paid $50. This was in 2007. The car's probably worth at least $150 now. On the more affordable side, a great practical classic that you could drive every day and want to drive every day is a first-generation Buick Riviera. This car is from the first year, 1963, and was one of Bill Mitchell's most inspired creations. Bill Mitchell was GM's styling chief from 1958 until 77, but had worked in the styling department of GM since 1936. He's best known for his work on the 49 Cadillac, the Tri-5 Chevys, and the 63 Corvette. With the Riviera, legend has it that he was attending the 1959 London Motor Show and one night spotted a Rolls-Royce in the fog. He could just barely make out the roofline of it, but that was enough to inspire him to replicate that knife-edge styling element that works so well on the Riviera. This Riviera had 37,000 original miles and all the documentation to prove it. The car was also really well optioned with AC, power windows, power wing windows, power seats, leather, AM/FM, 4-note horn, turbine wheel covers, cornering lights, and tinted glass throughout, the color of which really stands out against the dark burgundy color. A woman named Florence Flagg ordered this car new, and she kept every service record for the next 30 years, as well as all of the original dealer paperwork. This is the type of entry-level collector car you want to buy. A landmark design with bulletproof mechanicals, lots of options, good colors, good odometer, and a stack of paperwork that goes back to day one. Well, if you've noticed a trend, it's that I like low-mile original cars. Who doesn't, right? We'll end with this one, a 1959 Dodge Sierra Spectator wagon with 44,000 original miles. These wagons are impossible to find in any condition, and to find one that's factory black on red in this kind of shape is super rare. This car had 2 owners from new and was ordered with the power package option, which included dual exhaust and a 4-barrel Carter carburetor on top of the 325 cubic inch Super Red Ram V8. This car had original paint and interior, and the seats had been protected by plastic covers from new. I've had some cars with these old-fashioned seat covers, but have never seen one with this star pattern, which kind of took the cool factor to the next level. Being the Spectator version of the Sierra meant that it had a 3rd seat, so you ended up with seating for 9 and no seatbelts for anybody. This wagon was pretty much in the wrapper wherever you looked, and being a California car was just incredibly solid from top to bottom. The spare tire on these wagons is mounted on the inside of the quarter panel, and it just takes one look in this area to know that this is a real survivor. This car was optioned with the Torque Flight push-button transmission, plus power steering and power brakes. Just a really nice old cruiser, and another one that I'd love to have back. So that does it. I hope you enjoyed checking out these nice old cars. I sure had fun selling them. Thanks for watching.